Okay, so now we continue with our training on the Allied School Management platform. We'll be continuing just like we've been looking at the deployment guide on how to set up the system, basically on how to capture all the required information that we need. So now today we are going to be looking at how to set up the grades and levels. And we've opened the deployment guide. I've explained previously in previous videos how we can go about to get to the screen. If you are joining us or you're not clear with this, I would suggest you take a look at the other videos and then get yourself acquainted with that process. Typically, it's, you can enter the command CM01 here, or you can navigate from the menu. So now we'll be looking at the admission types. And so basically the admission type allows us to define how the modes at which people can come into the school. And so basically, for all intents and purposes, it just allows you to capture whether, okay, say this person came in as a direct entry student, or maybe came in through an entrance examination, or from a transfer from a different school perhaps, or from whatever the variations that applies in that school organization. The admission type allows us to capture that information, and it's very similar to a lot of the other screens we have had a look at. So familiar interface, we have the new entries. You can click on new entries and we get the list of buttons. You can always add, so I can always click here and add a new record. So let's say for example I want to add a new one and call it entrance examinations. So I'm just basically saying this is another mode of entry into the school. So once I'm done with it, I'll set the flag as active. Once I'm done, I'll save. You must always remember we don't need to forget how to save. And so that is for admission type. So at that point, you've created an admission type. You will find out that when we begin to work with the school, with the students' details in proper, we'll find out that we have certain places where all this information will fit in and all come together. So when we get to those points, I'll be sure to highlight them. Now we're looking at the admission results, grades and subjects. And so basically what this allows us to do is to capture the results that are, or the expectations for results in the particular discipline that is being offered. Okay, so next we'll be looking at the result subjects. And so basically this is just basically setting the requirements for subjects that need to be available in the result. And so basically if there is an external exam and the result of which is required for the admission process, then you need to state here the specific results that you expect to be in that examination in the result that is presented. And so here we are going to define the subjects that we need. So like I said, these are all for data input, for data that is coming in. So let's say we create a couple of subjects, we'll call it 001. Let's say, okay, let's call it further mathematics. So we expect further mathematics. Expect anybody that is trying to submit his results, perhaps his school living certificate or something, should have one of the subjects that have been listed here. So let's go and let's put English language. So this can go on as much as is possible. All the possible subjects you feel need to be captured. So let's put in chemistry. And on and on, and we can all go on and create as much of them as we need, and it goes on like that. Now, once we are done with setting of the result subjects, we would like to go to the result grades. And basically, we are saying these are the grades, or rather, these are the grade ranges. So now, this is not appropriate, and I don't think the data has been used, so we'll just delete this. So basically, we are setting the range of the results. Typically you could say, okay, an A starts from 70 to 100. So we could go ahead and define that structure. So we could give it the code A, call it grade A, and then the minimum score is 70 and the maximum score is 100. So this is a sample of what a grade would look like. We call it grade B. And remember that this is for the result grades. These are not the grades that are used within the system. These are grades that are used for results that are being brought into the system. So we call this grade B. And I think grade B will start from maybe 60 to 69. And then we have a grade C. Say, I think grade C will be from 50. So we call it grade C, start from 50 to 59. Then we have a grade D. Okay, grade D starts from 45 49. Then we have a grade E. And that will start from 40 to the familiar let my people go. And then we have a grade F. Obviously, grade F means that the person has failed. Grade F, and that will start from 0 to 39. So we've essentially set up all these grades. We've set them all up. You can see they all have the red check mark, which means they have not been saved. So we click on the save button to commit it all. And then once we're done with the grades, so we've set up the subjects and we've set up the grades. Now we can go on and set up the result types. The result types are now required. The result type becomes the subtypes of the student results. We'll see that, like I said, when we begin to deal with the student information. So always, bear this at the back of your mind, that all this information we are filled in here, we are going to have to make use of them again in future when we are capturing those records. So now we are looking at the result types. And then when we open the result type, so basically we are trying to set up the result types. Basically, the result type constitutes the result of the examination you wish to capture. So we can go ahead and do a create, and then we can give it a code. So 0001, set flag as active, and then let's call it okay, let's call it West African. I think that's the popular WAEC. West African examination. Council. So let's say this is the exam, the particular examination result that we expect the student to submit, and you can see that. So I would like to introduce this new structure. So this is a unique structure which I think I'm introducing for the first time, and basically what this allows us to do is to select from a list, select multiple entries from a list. So you can see that these are the available options, and then whatever options we've selected will come on this side. So this side would represent the options that have been selected, and then while this will represent the options that are still available. But before we get there, we'll talk about the scoring type. So the scoring type allows us to specify how do the scores of the how do we expect the scores to be captured. So it can either be grades, in which case the results should just capture the grades, so whether the grade A, B, C, D, all those grades we have defined, or we want it to capture both the score and the grade, or we just wanted to capture the score. So these are the three possible alternatives. We don't really need to specify a country specific. And then so once we've done that, we now select the subjects we expect to be available in that result sheet. Yeah, so we can select further maths, select English, and so we select chemistry. So once we've done this, and then we can now put in the minimum or maximum score. So basically we're saying these are the minimum scores and these are the maximum scores that are possible in that result. Typically that will be 0 to 100. Then once we are done, then the decimal hand, this basically rounding. So we just say round up, round down. So this basically every score and in decimal, how does the system handle this? So we say round up. Then the time constraint, I've talked about time constraint before, and I said I would push the full details of this into when we begin to talk about the students. So for now, we'll just select it as continuous. As continuous. Well, not necessarily continuous. It should actually be at most once, because it means that result should be available only once. We don't need to, you only bring it when you're coming to the school. After that, which you don't need to have it again. So the actual time should be at most once. So we don't need to fill in the time constraint routine because we have not selected a user-defined time constraint. So with this, we are good. We can now go ahead and save. Okay, so I'm still getting red flags. Okay, so the red flag is gone. I think I need to about. And so I now say create. So once I create, so now we've created a new result type, which can now can be filled in when the student is trying to fill in the result. Okay, so that said, next we go to, so now we begin to get a bit more interesting, and I'll need us to pay some attention because at this point the complexity begins to rise a bit. But stick with me, and we'll all do fine. So at this point I want to introduce some new concepts, and this applies or pertains to when we are doing assessments for the students within the system. That is, after the students have been brought into the system and we are now doing result computations, trying to assess them, basically scoring, performance assessments in examinations, tests, and all that. There are certain things we need to set up, and as an administrator or as a user or whoever is in charge of configuring the system, it's important that you understand how this works so that you can provide the right kind of setup that makes sense within the organization, because every organization is going to have, every school is going to have their own unique requirements, and so there's really no one size fits all. Various schools might have various computational distributions and requirements, and it's important that whoever is managing that process has a clear understanding of what the expectations are from the school and what the expectations from the system is like, and knows how to reconcile those expectations. And so to start with it, I'll start with the levels. We had already looked at the setup when we talked about faculties in the previous training. When we talked about academic structures, we highlighted that the school organization can be divided into three major structures. The academic school, and the faculty, and the department. And then we said that within those departments you could have different educational programs and at the same time various disciplines. Now, so we are going to look at the levels. Now, levels could be, levels are typically the levels within a department. So you have maybe in a particular department you have level 1, level 2, level 3. If for example a 4-year course means that there are actually 4 levels in a primary school that has from primary 1 to 6. It means that there are actually 6 levels. If it's a nursery that has maybe nursery 1 to 3, then there are actually 3 levels. So I think by now you get the idea. So what we're trying to do here is to set up those levels, and we click on this, and now you see it's pretty straightforward. So we have defined the first thing is we have to make sure that this number in the level, these are the unique numbers for each level. Every level is given a unique numeric digit, and it's for consistency's sake. Is advised. It's usually advised that the levels are in ascending order, according to the order of the scale, essentially. So we have nurseries at the very top, and then we have the highest levels, SS3, at the very bottom, and then the sequence is descending in that order. You could typically as an administrator, if you're having to implement multiple systems, you could give them a few gaps. Perhaps you could you wouldn't really need to follow them in that sequence, having 1, 2, 3. You could give them gaps of 10, so you could have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on and so forth. This is basically to give room to accommodate future expectations. Perhaps the school tomorrow decides to have a new level. You can easily slot it in and still maintain the ordering sequence without breaking much. Okay, so that said, I'll just select one. We wouldn't be needing to create any one, but creating is a very straightforward process. You can select one and then do a modify. So you can look at basically the field it has. So yeah, this is very straightforward. It has the level and it has the name. And then this typically applies, so you have the minimum credit and the maximum credit, and this typically applies to higher institutions where there are expectations. For example, in a university, the expectation that might be that if you are in maybe level 1 or level 2, there is a minimum number of credit units you are expected to offer in that class before you could have been said to have completed the expectations of that class. Likewise, there could be a maximum number of courses you expected to perform in that class, beyond which the courses could no longer be registered, and so you have the opportunity of entering this here. And then if you remember, we had defined academic classes in the past. Now we're able to capture that from here. So at that particular level, remember we started out by defining all the possible academic levels. Now all the possible academic classes. Now all those academic classes might not apply to all the levels, depending on the size and the number or the volume of students. If you had defined maybe 10 classes, your primary 1 might consume the 10 classes, but the primary 2 might consume only 5 or 6. Primary 3 or primary 4 might consume even less. And so it's important at this point that you now tie them to the specific levels that are available. And to do that, we can see the interface. We have talked about this interface before and how it works. So basically, this arrow allows us to push information left and right. Remember what I said, those on the left are the details that are available, while those on the right are the ones that have been selected. And then another very important flag is this flag here called admittable. We've had a lot of experience with people that tend to forget and do not understand what it does, and then they are left confused when the system is not doing what they expect. So we'll find out that when we begin to admit students, we'll make references to that when we get to that point. When we begin to admit students, you will find out that in the place where you're supposed to select the level of the student, not all the available levels will be dropped. Only the levels that have been flagged as admittable. And the idea is it's basically a way to checkmate the admission process. So typically a school might say, that new students cannot be admitted in, say, primary 6 or SS3 or JS3. And so basically, to achieve that, it means that JS1 and JS2, SS1 and SS2 can be admittable, and so in that case you set their flag as admittable, whereas that of JS3 and SS3 will be left unchecked. And so that will still be intelligent enough to select and list or only allow those that have been selected as admittable to be used in the admission process. Yeah, so that basically explains the academic levels. So now that we're done with the academic levels, we'll go to basically the assessment part. And at this point, like I said earlier on, it begins to get a bit more interesting, so I will enjoin us to pay good attention and follow up. So now we're introducing the concept of what we call session types, and I'll open this. So within the system, we have the concept of session type, and a session type essentially means a unit of work or a unit of measurable performance activity, a unit of a measurable performance activity. What am I trying to say? So a session type refers to an activity that constitutes a performance evaluation of the student. So I'll take it again. A session type refers to an activity that constitutes a performance evaluation of the student. Also we have a lot of common ones. We have the normal examinations. So an examination becomes a session type because it is a process of evaluating a student's performance. You have tests. We could have practicals. You could have attendance. You could have lecture notes. You could have attendance to lecture. So basically, all the possible variations, we'll see how these things all tie together and how the system is helping you do a whole lot of work, just by having set it up properly. So the session types are basically capturing, like I said, all the activity that lead to a performance evaluation. Yes. So we could have, like I mentioned earlier, examinations, tests, practicals, field work, term papers, whatever it is that is an assessment that is accessible, that can be used as an assessment for the students, will fall into this category of a session type. And it's important that you set them up, because later down within the system, when we begin to access the functionalities of the system proper, we will see that we'll be making references to these session types, and it's important that we have defined them properly so that we don't make a mistake when we're using them and use them wrongly. And it's very simple to set up. A 2-digit code on this side to identify. You can always add new ones. We can click on our new and then add, like we've been doing in other pages, and create your own arbitrary session types based on the expectations of the school, of course. So the idea is that you're going to capture those expectations of the school and then fill them in here. Now we've had a lot of situations where people made mistakes, and then some schools, they give first term test, second term test, and all that, and so they are tempted to create 2 different session types. That would depend purely on the expectations of the school and the system. A test is really a test, regardless of how many times you're writing it. Within the application, you can actually create a test multiple times, so you have the flexibility of choosing both ways, either setting up a single test and then having multiple entries of that test, or if you want to have a much broader reporting structure, you specifically create a different session type for each test. So you could have a different session type for midterm test, you could have a different session type for end of term test, and once you've done that, you capture that information and store it here, and then it will still work very well without any problems. So now at this point, once we are done with the session types, we will go to set up the grading types. Now there's a big difference between the session types and the grading types, and I want to explain that here. In fact, to explain that, I think we need to go into it so for us to understand it. So I'll select examination, for example, and I go in here. Now when we come in here, I want to clarify something first on how the system works and what the system is actually going to do for you after you've done all this setup. The idea is that when you've done all this setup, The system does every other thing, does all the computation, all the result computation for you. And all you will need to do as perhaps the class teacher or the administrator is to feed in the scores for each of the session types you have created. So for example, if a student scores maybe 30 over 40 in a test, all the administrator needs to do is go, select the test, and enter the result of the score of that student and save the record. When it comes to result computation, the system is going to be able to do an automatic computation of all the session types, all the assessments that have been captured for that student, whether it is examination, test, practicals, term papers, you name it, field work, whatever it is, and then come up with the average score, which will then become the effective score of that student. And you find this in cases where you want to, maybe for example, let's look at the hypothetical situation where a school decides that they want to have examinations at 70%. The total score, 70% of it is made up of exams, and then maybe 20% is made up of tests, and then 10% is made up of maybe attendance and all that. So utilizing the grading types, we are able to set it up, and then the system, because basically the system uses the grading type to perform its computations. And now, so let's go on, and we'll follow as we go on. Now at this point, we set up the code for the grading type and the name. Obviously we set it up active. Then the category is very interesting. Now we have different categories, 3 mostly. So we have the first category of assessment. So when we select a category of assessment, what we're trying to say is that an assessment category can be made up of multiple assessments. So say for example, we could call a grading type attendance. That would be the general definition of that grading type, attendance. And we are going to specify it as say an assessment. Okay, no, this is not a very good example. Let's use something more concrete. Let's say we have, let's go back to the example we gave before. Say we have test, and that test, we had divided test into midterm test and end of term test. So in other words, we had created 2 session types. We had created one session type called midterm test and a second session type called end of term test. Now it means that when the data input process has commenced, you will need to, for each student, you need to capture 2 different tests. The first test for the midterm, the second test for the end of term. However, when the system is performing the result computation, remember we have said that test constitutes 20 marks, regardless of how many tests the person has written. So basically at this point, you can see, remember this our grid, because we have created 2 different tests. We would have had the midterm test and the end of term test here. We can select both of them and push them here. So basically what we are telling the system to do is cumulate all the sum of all the scores of all the tests we have specified there. That's both the midterm test and the end of term test. We should cumulate their score, find the average of that cumulated value, and assign that as a fraction of that 20%. So that will now constitute the 20% allocated for test. I hope I'm not confusing you, so please go with me. The idea is that we can specify multiple assessments. This is for assessment. The same thing applies when we go and select under the category. We select it as attendance. Same concept. The only difference now is that we have to choose different attendance categories. Remember, attendance could be maybe attendance at school, attendance at lectures, and maybe attendance at practicals. These are different kinds of attendances. So ab initio, it is assumed that you would have set up those various attendance types as session types. If you remember, you need to set them up as session type because they have become a unit of performance evaluation. Yes, you want to evaluate the student by either his attendance at school, his attendance at lectures, or his attendance at practicals, or at field services, or whatever it is. As far as it has to do with attendance, it could be through a biometric entry or biometric capture. As long as that data is available, it has been made available to the system. we can now put in all the various attendance. So we're going to move. So by then we would have had all those various attendances listed on the available types. We would have moved them, just like we have examinations here. We would have moved. So for example, we would have, since this is attendance, assuming this was our attendance we are trying to set up, we would have removed this, we have just removed this and then moved in, lecture attendance. If we had attendance for practicals, we'll move it as well. We have attendance for maybe course or whatever it is, whatever attendance we are trying to measure, we move them all there. And so basically what's going to happen is that during the results computation, the system is going to pull all those various attendances and then find the weighted average of them all to give you the relative value. Remember we said attendance will be 10%. So whatever has been gotten will now be divided to give you 10% of that, of the total score. So that's how you see how the system is able to take a whole lot of work away from you, rather than you having to compute that process manually. All you need to do is just feed in the data and then the system takes care of that computation. Now in cases where we just have a single assessment to be done, we don't need to go through assessments. We can just select the session type and then select one of the session types that are available and be done with it. Yeah, so that is what so basically I've explained. I can see as you're navigating or you're iterating or scrolling through the options, you can see that the interface is also responding accordingly. So as we select assessment and all that, you keep on changing. And once we are done, we can now we can save this entry. So we won't make any changes here because it's already a live record. But you get the idea. You get the general idea. Now, so once you're done with grading types, you now need to go to the grading points. Now, grading points are very similar to the result grades that we had done, but they are not the same. Grading points are used within the school, while the result grades are used for results that are outside of the school. So results that you are bringing in might have a different evaluation, and that is where the grading types are used. They are not used within the system. So within the system, the grading type that I use are the grading point, the course grading point. So you could just look at it and see the breakdown. Very simple, very similar to what we've done in the past. The only difference now is that there is an extra field they call the total points, and basically you find this used when you're trying to calculate the GPA or the CGPA of a course. So for example, this is the case in point B. We all know that a grade B starts from 60 to 69, and we also know that a grade B in school amounts to about 4 credit units on a 5-point scale. On the 5-point scale, with grade A being a 5-point, and grade B becomes a 4-point, grade C becomes a 3-point score and all that. Yeah, so it basically allows us to assign all this in so that when we come to result computation, the result can automatically compute the GPA and the CGPA and all that based on these grading points that we have set up. So with that, I think we'll come to the end of the grade levels. Like I always say, practice will make perfect, and what we've tried to do is to expand on the information that is available, show you the functionality, the depth and breadth of the system. But nonetheless, we would expect that we would be able to make out the time to play around with the system, get familiar with it, and then before you know it, you'll be doing much better than you expect. So with this, I'll say so a good day, and I wish you all the best. All right, thanks.